Welcome back everybody, and in this video I'm going to be going over what we started with the Lightroom tutorial and showing you how I edit this photo in Photoshop. So I will be uploading a video so you can watch the start to finish with both Lightroom and Photoshop. Unfortunately, my screen recorder stopped recording in the middle of my Photoshop one last time and I didn't realize it until my post-production phase. So I'm redoing it now and uploading it as a separate video. And if you're new to the channel, I'm Nick Boris with Lively Productions, bringing you my best tips and tools to grow as a wildlife, landscape, and outdoor lifestyle photographer and filmmaker. All right, let's head into the computer and start editing this photo. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and just ignore the whole test 2 and test 1 groups. Those are from the first 2 times that I recorded this and the footage was not usable. So we're gonna be doing the third edit. So just ignore those. They are not there. So we have our background layer here, and you can either click and hit Control or Command J to duplicate it, or you can grab it and drag it into the little plus sign down here to create a background copy. Now I'm going to move this background copy up above here, and with that background copy we are going to, the first thing I do is I usually will sharpen the photo. So I'm going to sharpen it by going to our blending modes, and in the blending modes I'm going to do hard light, come up here to filter, do other, high pass, and do a radius of 1.5. And now if we zoom in, we can see the before and the after. I don't want it that incredibly sharp, even though the photo is blurry, but this is the one that we're working with now. The next thing I do is I like to soften the highlights, so do a little bit of a Orton Effect on the photo itself, but just select it to the highlights. So we're going to do Shift Control Alt E or Shift Command Alt E if you're using Mac, and then we're going to go up to Select Color Range, move sampled color to highlights, and in your preview box here you can see all the highlights that are going to be selected, and you can move your range, either increasing it or lowering it. So I want 190 is what I had it set at for the last time, so I'm going to do that. And if you do fuzziness, it will also expand on those highlights itself. So I'm going to drop that back down to 20. We're going to hit OK. And now you can see everything that is selected. So we're going to do Control or Command J to put those on a new layer. Then we're going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and you want to, in the radius, you want to put the megapixel size of your camera. Now because I use a Canon 1DX Mark II, it has 21.2 megapixel sensor, so I'm going to do 21.2 pixels. We're going to hit OK. Now obviously this is way too blurry, we don't want all that, but before we lower that, I usually like to go through the blending modes again and look at either color dodge, linear dodge, or light and color. And I'm going to go ahead and click color dodge here, and I'm going to drop this down to 20. Now if we zoom in to like this section here, you can see how it just kind of blends those colors a little bit. Highlights naturally blur, so we want to try and keep that the same. So the next thing that I like to do is I like to add a little bit of a vignette. So we're going to go to our adjustment box here, do curves, and drag from the top here to about the center. And then hitting B for brush, we're going to hit X to turn our brush to black, because black removes and white adds. We're going to leave our flow at 100, and our softness we're going to bring up to 100% because we want a hard brush. And then we want to go just right here, because you can see our highlighted section is all this blue in the open of the tree. So all this right here. So we're going to make a circle big enough to kind of fill that in. Now with that done, we're gonna click our layer here, go to properties, and in feather, I'm gonna do 200 pixels. And then I'm gonna do Controller Command J to duplicate that, Controller Command I to invert that. Click here on the curves layer style box, go back to properties, bring this back up and out to about right there. So input 192 to output 255. And now we're going to go back to curves 1 and we're going to drop this down to about 60. And we're going to curves 8 copy and drop this down to about 45. Then we'll group those. We're going to call this curves vignette. And now you can see what we did. So now if we just take a look, we've already gone 5 steps, and this is our before, this is our after. So we're making some headway. Okay, the next thing that I like to do is add a gradient map. So this gradient map, what it does is you can isolate your blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, and your whites. And you can kind of move them all around and kind of really pick out which ones, which highlights you want brighter, which whites you want brighter. And overall, it kind of gives a more contrasty and depth feel to the overall image. And that's what I like to do with a lot of my images, is make them almost pop and stand out. So again, going to our adjustments here, gradient map. Now this is in reverse, so we're going to go to basics, click this first one, flipping those. And now starting with our blacks here, you're gonna double click the little box, go to color, click the color, and we're just making sure, okay, all those are 0, perfect. So true black, 100, true white. I'm gonna add one here in the center, changing this from 100 to 50, from 50 to 25, from 25 to 75. So now you can see blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites. So we have the photo itself was shot overexposed. Like I said in the Lightroom tutorial, I was not planning on shooting this bird flying. I didn't even know it was getting ready to fly. I literally took my eyes off the nest for only a fraction of a moment, looked back up, and she was jumping out of the nest. And I just lifted my camera, shot, and I snapped this photo, which is why it's not sharp, because I was not prepared. But it's going on Instagram, and no one's going to be looking at it that closely, and I'm on a mission to reshoot it with it actually being sharp. So it was overexposed. Normally I shoot somewhat dark, so I'm not going to mess with the highlights, and I'm not going to mess with the whites too much, except for bringing the highlights down a little bit, maybe just 80. Now midtones, we can darken those, and our shadows we're really going to bring down. And I'm going to add another one right here, change that to 15. And then we're going to go back to our layer, our gradient map, go to our blending modes, and click luminosity. That way it's not black and white. And now you have our before image and our after image. So really flat to a lot more depth and contrast, except it's too punchy, so I usually will bring it down to about 75. All right, now we're going to do Shift Control Alt E. We're going going to come up here to our quick selection tool, and we're going to select, just do a rough selection of our eagle here. Get out some of these trees. Because I shoot in RAW, a lot of the colors are usually flat. So everything is a flat picture profile I shoot in, and I shoot in RAW so I can get a lot more of the color back that was naturally within the scene. So you can see around the eagle, all these pine needles are lit up yellow and orange, and you have some slight haloing from the sun being early morning coming through the wings and the feathers. So that is what we're going to be playing with right now, is going to be adding some warmth back into the backdrop of the tree and the eagle. But we don't want it all on the eagle. We want to make it seem like it's coming from behind the eagle, because that is where the light was naturally coming from. So we're going to, with our eagle selected, we're going to hit select and mask. And our radius we'll bring to 2. Smooth we'll bring to 8. Feather 10. Contrast 10. Leave shift edge alone. And then we're going to put him on a new layer. And then this layer that we just cut him off of, we can delete. Now we want to put the warmth behind him, so we're going to click on the layer beneath him so that our sun warmth layer is behind him. So now, with our brush selected, go ahead and put your hardness at 0. Flow will do 20%. Zoom in. I'm going to take some yellow off of his beak right here. And we're going to click just to see where this falls. Okay, so yeah. So we're in that orangish yellow, right where we want to be. It's a natural color from the scene. So again, keeping everything natural. Yes, we are editing here, but I want to keep it as natural as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and put all that right in the center, right where that warmth is. And I might even come down here and add some spots to where it is hitting the leaves a little bit more. And don't worry, we're going to remove it from a lot of these darker areas, so we're not causing too much manipulation to where the sun actually isn't hitting. All right, and we'll get this little branch down here. Okay, so now blending options. I'm gonna do overlay. Now we're gonna open up by double clicking the side of our layer here, opening our layer styles. Underlying layer, we're gonna drag it from the blacks and remove them from the shadows. So we just want it kind of touching the highlights, or touching the midtones, the highlights, and the whites. So there's our before, there's our after. Next thing we're gonna do is some dodging and burning. So I'm gonna add some shadows back into the eagle, kind of underneath the breast, and I'm gonna add some highlights back into the wings so that we can really make those wings pop. So let's go to curves. We're gonna create a curves layer. We're gonna drag this down just a little bit there, and we're gonna Control or Command I to invert it. Label that S for shadows. Create another curves. Bring it slightly more up. Control or Command I to invert that one. Label it H for highlights. With our brush still selected, we're going to hit X to reset it to white. Leaving it at about 20 is fine with me. Then we're going to hit enter. Because this photo is going to be going on Instagram, we're not really going to want to dive too much into the details. So I'm only going to zoom in to about 100. I'm going to lower my brush size here. I'm going to keep my flow at 30. Normally I keep it about 20, but I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing at home well enough. So I'm going to start painting in the shadows on the wings here. And I'm just going to make simple, quick passes so you can see what I'm doing. And actually, you know what? We're just going to bump those up to 100. And we'll do the underbelly, under the mouth, getting all these shadows. So normally I would go through and I would do each individual wing, and I'd take my time and really make sure I'm only getting the shadows. But I want you guys to kind of see what I'm looking at. So I'm looking at all these areas that the shadows are already present on the eagle himself, and I'm just increasing those shadows by painting over them. And you can be as detailed and meticulous or not as you please. So make sure your brush is set to white, because I totally just did all that without my brush being set to white. So I can add this on. Okay, now we're in business. Now you can see the before and the after. Just a little bit more depth. And now for the highlights, again, our brush set to white. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more because we're going to be working on the edges of the wings right here. So our brush size set to the highlighted part. And we're just going to make each individual feather on the wing stand out, just increasing the natural highlights that are already there. Before and after. So on both of these, if you wanted to, like for the shadows, I would go in here and I would remove them from the highlights. So pressing Alt, the second half of the teardrop, bringing them down to the midtones and shadow area. And then for the highlights, doing the opposite, taking them away from the blacks and only applying them to the natural highlights. So now you can see a lot more subtle. But that's all we want to do, is we want to make subtle changes. Now I will add an Orton effect, very similar to what we did with the highlights in the beginning, but now we're going to do the overall photo, and it just kind of gives it more of a dreamy look, and as well as focuses our eye and your viewer's eye to the subject, which is the eagle. So again, we just did Shift, Control or Command, Alt and E, creating a new layer, and we are going to put an adjustment layer on it, click our image, go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, leaving it at 21.2 for the radius, Image, Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast, and I did 20 and 20. Hitting our brush, increasing it, hit D to set your brush back to normal, and making sure it's on black to remove. And we're going to click our layer, and remove it. So now we have all that, and I'm going to come back in here, hit X to add white, to make some of this stuff where it wouldn't be in focus and where it should more naturally be in focus. I'm going to make those stand out. And then we'll lower this to about 15 or 20. We'll do 16. can see the before, the after. Open up our layer styles, and we're going to remove this from the blacks because those usually would not be blurry. And I'm going to increase this back up to 20. Shift Control or Command, and then Alt and E for a new layer. Convert it to a smart object. Filter, Camera Raw, or you can do Shift Control A. And here I'm going to increase my shadows a little bit, my highlights a little bit, bring my blacks down, and I'm gonna bump my texture up to 15, and my clarity up to 15. Then I'm gonna do Shift Controller Command Alt E again. Put all this in a group, label this test 3, and now we have our before image and our after image. Before and after. If you really want a closer look, I'll put the images up on the screen so you can see a true before and a true after. If you found this video helpful and you learned something, give this video a like, consider subscribing too, as it really does help the channel out and gets this video out to more people. If you have any further questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to add at all, please feel free to put it in the comment section below. I do read and respond to everybody, whether it is good criticism or bad criticism. All of it helps this channel grow and helps me do a better job at putting out better quality videos for you guys. Other than that, check the description below where you'll find the gear that I use, all my social media handles so you can hike along with me. That's it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.